Hi everyone, let's get started with these tips. So these tips are for your upcoming Mexico travels. We did travel during the last weeks of March 2021. So hopefully these are helpful to you and your family and friends. So for tip number 1, I would say is get pesos before you depart. I went to my local bank, Bank of America, and put in the request. Got my pesos within about 2 to 3 business days via the mail. And it was a pretty good exchange rate. You can do this once you get to Mexico, but just keep in mind there may be transaction fees, service fees, or just a different exchange rate than what you would get in the US. Okay, so for tip number 2, I am so glad I ended up doing this, but just make sure to pre-download any offline Google Maps. I'm not sure if this works the same with other map services, but personally I love Google Maps. I use it during all of my travels, and if you pre-download any sort of offline maps, they work just as fine as if you were connected to Wi-Fi or your regular data. So pre-download them. I'll see if I can put up a video right now, that way you can get an idea of how to download those. Once you've searched for the city you're looking for, what you're going to do is drag this particular icon up. Once you drag it up, there's going to be a download icon. Go ahead and press that, and it'll take you to an overall map of Mexico City or whatever city you're searching for. And you will just go ahead and click on the download icon on the bottom right, and you'll be all set to go. It's really useful. You can cover a large map area and still use them when you're offline. Okay, so for tip number 3, I would say pre-book and figure out all of your transportation before actually getting there. Now this might seem like a bit of work as far as pre-planning your transportation, but you don't necessarily have to book the full length of your trip. I would say just figure out what you're going to do once you get to each city or once you get to your destination. The last thing you want to do is try to figure out at the last minute how to use the metro, the bus system, and you just kind of get lost or confused. So figure that out beforehand. There's tons and tons of YouTube videos on how to use different systems. Alright, so tip number 4, this is very similar or along the topic of transportation, but if you are going to be visiting different parts of Mexico, I would say don't be afraid to transfer via their bus system. We did use 2 different companies while traveling. We used ETN and Primera Plus. Both are considered some of the nicer buses within Mexico. They're considered pricier, but I would say definitely well worth the spending or the splurge. But honestly, compared to US prices, what you're paying for these 2 companies isn't as bad as what you pay here in the US. ETN, I would say I spent maybe about $30 for a 5.5 hour trip from Mexico City to Guanajuato. And then for Primera Plus, we ended up paying maybe about $15 round trip for a trip from Guanajuato to San Miguel de Allende. So they are somewhat steeper than other bus companies, but they were very well worth it, and they were very, very comfortable and clean as well. If you travel a lot, this isn't just pertaining to Mexico, but if you are planning on having long stays, you're planning on carrying a lot of stuff, a lot of clothing specifically, I would say invest in a good storage spacer bag for your luggage. This is very similar to what I'm talking about. This isn't specifically the one I used because this does have a vacuum valve. The ones I used are from Daiso. You can also find some on Amazon. If you do have a Daiso near you, which is similar to a 99-cent store, but it's a Japanese version of it, they have some available for $1.50, and they have all sorts of sizes. Those are usually the ones I use, and they last for about maybe 3 to 4 uses. Usually you just squeeze out the air that's within the storage bag. If you don't have a Daiso near you, you can also find them on Amazon, and they're usually under $10. But they do work great. As you can see, you can store a lot of clothing within these bags. This is of course a different brand than the ones I'm talking about, but they work just the same, and it's for the same purpose. Okay, so for our next tip, which I believe is tip number 6, Make sure to not lose your Mexican customs card. That custom card is going to be given to you when you first arrive, more than likely on your flight to your Mexican destination for the first time. And it's about the size of your passport once they detach your copy. But don't lose that. You will have to pay a fee if you lose it. I believe it's about $40 to $50 USD per person. So what I did just to keep it in a safe place is I stored it in my little passport booklet. I got this booklet at Disneyland in Paris a couple years ago. But you can find very similar ones to this particular design on Amazon. Works super great because you have a little pocket to store your receipts, boarding pass, and your customs card. Okay, so for number 7, this is about souvenirs and price haggling in Mexico. So for souvenirs, most of our souvenirs came from local mercados, outdoor and street vendors. We really tried to avoid big companies or even the airports for souvenirs. So for your souvenirs, I would just say if you are going to be visiting a mercado, which is more of a local mall, I would say, that's the best comparison. If you are going to be visiting a mercado, the best thing to do is just do a quick loop around the area. So don't buy anything at the first stop quite yet. Just take, I would say, a few minutes just to do a full loop. Ask about prices, that way you can compare at other stalls. And just kind of make a mental note of what things you like and what things are affordable and what things you want to bring back home. Because what we noticed when doing this was that we might fall in love with this particular item at our first stop, but the 3rd, 4th, 7th, 9th store might have the same item at a cheaper price. They might give you a better offer, they might have something in better condition or quality. So just do a first loop and then just go back to whichever vendor you want to buy from. With price haggling, just make sure to be friendly, make sure to be reasonable. Of course, you don't want to be offering $1 for something that was originally quoted to be $20. That's just borderline rude, to be honest. And they do take offense to it too. But with price haggling, never take, of course, the first price that's quoted. You always want to just haggle on the prices. This is something they're already used to. There are very few vendors or locals that don't price haggle, and they will just be very forward with you and tell you this is not the store for that. Just go somewhere else if you want to haggle. Very few of them did this, but there are still a couple. With price haggling, what I noticed worked out the best for me was I would, of course, say no to the first price, tell them I was still comparing and that I was gonna just keep looking and then come back. I did try the lower offer method and I just felt that was just too much back and forth. The minute you tell them you're gonna keep going and look at other vendors, they just already feel you're about to leave and they just want to give you the best price right then and there. So that oftentimes worked out the best for me and I got some of the best deals that way. So for number 8, this is going to be about safety in Mexico and in regards to COVID. So it's a little mix. So Mexico is really just like any other part of the world. So the best tip I can give you is practice common sense. Don't do anything you wouldn't do on a regular basis. Don't be flashy with any sort of jewelry. Don't count your pesos in front of other people or in very dense areas. Just do it privately, do it in your backpack, in your bag. There's no need to take them out. But again, you would think this is common sense, so just follow whatever you think is common knowledge. Don't get into official taxi drivers. If the vehicle looks suspicious, don't go in. If you're approached by suspicious individuals, don't talk to them. Just say no gracias, no thank you, walk away. When it comes to COVID, I will say that we were pretty safe. We did travel to multiple areas. Everyone was very safe. Everyone had hand sanitizer. All of the locals were wearing their face mask appropriately. Honestly, it just takes common sense as well. Wear a face mask over your nose and your mouth. Bring hand sanitizer, bring alcohol wipes, and you'll be just fine. We tested negative before leaving Mexico and we tested negative once returning back. So just practice common knowledge again. I will say that a lot of the locals And throughout of Mexico, what we notice is they take your temperature before going into their venue, whether a store or restaurant or even local tourist attractions. They'll take your temperature before going, they'll give you hand sanitizer. Sometimes what they'll also do is spray you down with some sort of disinfectant. So Mexico is very, very clean. What we did avoid though was the street vendors. Don't get me wrong, if we noticed that they were practicing sanitary functions, they were very clean, we ate at the location if it was an outdoor vendor. But unfortunately there were very, very few outdoor vendors that looked delicious, but they weren't following the best guidelines. So again, practice common knowledge, we just avoided it. I'm sure we could find other great food in Mexico, and we did. So for tip number 9, it's about restrooms. So Mexican restrooms are pretty normal. They're very similar to US restrooms. The only difference is that their plumbing is not as strong as ours. When we stayed at Airbnbs, which was 3 out of the 4 stays, all of the Airbnbs did request for us to not throw away our toilet paper in the toilet itself. And that's very common in Mexico, whether in Mexico City or even in touristy areas. Also, public restrooms. A lot of times there is a fee to use the public restroom. And it could be 5 pesos, 7 pesos, or as much as 10 pesos. So make sure to have change, because if you go up to someone and offer them a 20 peso, they might tell you we don't have change and you're out of luck. So you can either pay 20 pesos to use the restroom, or you can just hold it. So tying into this tip, make sure to carry pesos with you. Make sure to carry paper with you as well. Whether you carry a small roll of toilet paper, a small pack of Kleenex. A lot of times what you'll notice with public restrooms is that there's no toilet paper in the stalls. So as you approach these restrooms to pay for the service, you'll have people outside charging you, and they'll give you a small piece of toilet paper. Oftentimes they'll only give you about this much toilet paper. So I would say bring your own small toilet paper roll, or even bring small little Kleenex. For females, what I will also say is that a lot of times the public restrooms don't have the actual seat. So just be aware that when you go to a public restroom, you might have to use a restroom in a squat position. Okay, and so for our last tip, I mentioned something very similar to this already, but just make sure to pre-book everything in advance if you can, of course. We found that we were able to save anywhere between 10 to 20% off some entries, admissions, tours, just by pre-booking alone. So if you give yourself maybe about 2 weeks or more to look into this and pre-book, you'll find that a lot of sites and companies offer some sort of discounts. When booking the day of or while on vacation, you are taking a risk, to be honest. What we noticed was that some tour operators or some local walking tours were closed because they did not have any pre-bookings. So if you can at least pre-book, you'll give the company enough time to hire or to schedule your tour guide. That way your departure is guaranteed. So my point being is that if you leave your bookings until the day of, you are risking that there's no departures on those tours that you were interested in. And that would be a big bummer. So pre-book if you can. If not, just keep in mind there is the risk that there's no departures. Unfortunately, a lot of these locations have had a fall in tourism, so just to save extra money, save on bills or whatnot, they have their offices closed and don't have their everyday departures. So pre-book if you can. If you do have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave a question down below and I'll try to get back to you. If I do get enough questions, maybe I'll just make a part 2 out of this. Now this video is the start of a small series that I'm planning on making. I do plan on making a Cancun, Mexico City video, a Guanajuato video, and a Puerto Vallarta video as well. So hopefully I have at least 4 more videos to come, just going over any sort of recommendations, things that are suggested to bring, and just overall things I want to share with you guys. See you guys soon, but until the next one, bye!